is money.
It's nothing.
Balling. Premium or nothing.
When them or nothing.
Now you know.
Now you know.
Now you know.
Now you know.
Forget what they're on them. Yeah.
Welcome back, everyone, to season 2 of Couch Chronicles, Therapist After Dark. Hi, ladies.
And we back.
We're back.
Okay, so what's everybody been doing during our little break? We had a little bit of a pause between recording.
Sure.
I actually enjoyed the break. I needed the break.
Yeah.
I think what I realized, doing the podcast is that it does take a lot.
It
actually,
does.
mental and physically. So I kind of been resting, but also I'm in a period of like transition in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So just kind of been really putting some things into perspective of like what I want to do this year, where I'm going, some changes I want to make, and also, just spending time with my family and spending time and just like grounding myself.
Okay.
So it's been pretty good.
Okay, so it
trying to
sounds
get on the healthy nutritional track, because one thing the podcast will teach you when you on the screen,
Right.
is that you see the fluctuation of your emotions.
You're never
So
lying.
for me, it's definitely just being more healthier and just being comfortable under my skin.
I agree with that. I think that season 1 also taught me a lot of things about myself, and like, I think I was a little bit more critical of myself than I anticipated. So just during the break, I also spent some time just reconnecting to me, spending a little bit more time with my partner, trying to organize my life and getting ready for what is to come. We all have real outside jobs. So there's other demands that we've been having, but I'm happy to be back.
Yeah.
For me, I was stretched differently. I loved last season. It definitely was great doing it with my friends, my loved ones, all of those different things. I think when you are doing a new project or like in a new endeavor with people, it just brings you in contact with like underlying things that aren't always maybe in your face.
Definitely.
So I think that you guys were definitely like got in contact with that, because this is like a newer thing for you.
Yeah.
As you guys know, I've done a podcast, not necessarily on with visuals, right?
Yeah.
With camera and stuff like that. But I've done a podcast before. I love creative things, like being in front of the camera and things like that is something that is enjoyable to me. However, during the break, there were other ways in which that I was stretched outside of the podcast that I think kind of reminded me of familiar ways that I show up when I'm interpersonally connected, right? I think when you have relationships, when you pursue different things with different people, or you come in contact with familiar people, like family and stuff like that, you are kind of reminded of parts of yourself from when you were younger, or things that you just thought that you may have outgrown, but you realize like just time just has passed, not necessarily the lesson has been implemented, if that makes sense. And so definitely coming in contact with a lot of that stuff over the break, and I'm excited to stretch. 2025 just feels, I don't know, invigorating.
It does.
It does. I am on a high. I'm excited about it, even though the climate of what's going on can kind of be distracting.
Yes.
But I've chosen, because I fast like every January, do a spiritual fast. And one part of my fast, I also stay off social media. And I just decided to just not make it a priority even afterwards. And I feel like my life has been like, I've been feeling more productive, less anxious about what's going on. I only know stuff that's going on if you guys tell me something, or if like a family or friend send me something. But I really go on there very minimal. But since we're back, I'm going to try to be more active. I'm trying to be more active. But no, I think even even in spite of what the climate, that was going on in the climate, is really focusing on self. I feel like that's what 2025 is going to be. Is that yes, there's all these like distracting noise that are going on in the world, and it's really going back to you, giving yourself power, like getting into your own power, what that looks like, and not really get so distracted by everything that's going on political. And when I mean distracted, I don't mean like you don't do anything about it, but simply like I have power within me and what I can control, not power like Twitter thumbing, doing all these other things that I can't do.
Yeah, I definitely feel like you all know me. I have always had a hate relationship with the socials.
Yeah.
So I definitely have been trying to find some balance as well with just identifying ways that I can use it for the podcast.
Yeah.
And like, that's it. No, because
that's good. That's real, though. That's your truth. Yeah.
But I agree with you about being excited for 2025. I do think that the climate is disgusting to say the least, but also feels like we are on the verge of like, or on the cusp of some real change, some like revolutionary change. And I'm like, I'm with the shits. Let's go.
You know what Kendrick said at the Super Bowl change?
Like, the revolution is actually televised.
With the wrong people.
Yes. But honestly, was it the wrong people? Because I think, discomfort is really the prerequisite. It's the thing that is needed before people change, people move. We don't tend to, like you said, revolutionize, rebel when we're feeling comfortable.
Exactly.
When the grocery prices are nice and cute, and when we have our rights and things are comfortable. It is when we are uncomfortable, when we are feeling like things are being stripped away, when we are exhausted, that we really relish and sit in, wow,
or
slowing down. No, but like, honestly, but slowing down is needed.
That rest.
It's a fucking find out type of season.
Yeah. Fuck around, find out.
I mean,
okay.
That's what we say.
I guess so.
Yeah.
My limits are stretched to me.
Yeah.
I mean, your limit's been stretched, girl. So I'm glad that you finally, you're finally listening. But like, I think like I was saying is that like when you reach a point of exhaustion, when you have reached that bottom,
for sure,
there's literally nothing else to give. And so that at that point is when you realize, you know what? You kind of start to recount all the things that got you to this point and question if it's worth it.
Yeah.
Question whether or not it makes sense to continue on the journey of what you've been doing.
Exactly.
And sometimes that can feel really, I don't know, like debilitating in the fact that I don't have direction anymore, right? Like things that I think a client told me once, the word is scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fearful to relinquish and let go of the path that I have constantly walked on and the ways that I've showed up, and decide, you know what, I'm going to say fuck it, and I'm going to actually pour into myself like you're deciding to do.
I agree. It's time. Take inventory. Take stock of what you've got going on, the people, the places, and the things, because we are on the cusp.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is it that the people can expect from us for season 2? What's new?
Guest stars?
Yes.
Yes.
We got some people.
Who's going to challenge us? People who's going to challenge us. Because, the feedback is we agree too much. Some people want some drama. I don't know if it's drama.
Right. I don't know if the people are going to bring drama, but I definitely do think that they will bring some insight and some perspective that is different than ours, and maybe even similar. And
agreed.
Yeah.
I think even having someone else with us is exciting. I also think some of the topics and things we're going to be discuss is a continuation, but an extended version of some of them. And also, I feel like now we can have a more interactive with all of you guys like we didn't have before. That's what we want, is to have that one-on-one and like that really good interaction with us. So I think it's exciting, and it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
when the three ladies hit the town.
Oh, no, for real. And on top of that, we also changed our format. You'll see that a little bit in terms of the things that we are going to be introducing, the way that it's going to be looking. We want to hear, as Jay said, from you guys.
Yes.
So we, at the end of last season, we had an email, Couch Chronicles, TAD@gmail.com. And we want to hear from you. We want letters about questions that you have, confessions that you have, things that you want us to talk about. Just anything, kudos, compliments, praise, affirmations, blessings, any of those things. We want to really interact more with you guys this season.
Yes, I just want to.
We move up onto this world too.
We did. We hopefully that y'all can hear us
a little bit better.
And we want to hear from you, like Stephanie and Jay said. We want to hear from you all and engage with you a bit more. But just being mindful that we can give you we can answer your questions, but this is definitely not a substitute for a relationship with an actual therapist.
Yes, exactly.
All right.
We're therapists, but this is not a therapy.
Right. I'm not your therapist. But we want to hear from you, though.
That part. All right. We're going to move in. Should we cue in our confession?
Yeah.
Yes. So let's hear our confession.
Look, I need to admit something. I'm exhausted. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, completely drained. And you know what's wild? I feel guilty about it. Like I should be doing more, hustling harder, grinding longer. Because somewhere along the way, we all got fed this lie that if you're not constantly working, you're falling behind. That rest is for the weak. That if you're not making 6 figures off a side hustle, you're just not trying hard enough. And I bought into it. I really did. I pushed myself to the limit, chasing some version of success that was never even mine to begin with. But for what? More stress? More burnout? More feeling like I'm never enough? I can't do it anymore. I won't do it anymore. Because the truth is, I don't want to spend my life in a constant state of exhaustion just to prove something to people who don't even care. I want to enjoy my life, not just survive it. And if that means rejecting this toxic hustle culture and choosing peace instead, so be it.
Okay, so that was quite the confessional. So the last question was, can we please normalize not glorifying burnout? Life's short. I'd rather spend my time living in it than hustling myself into an early grave. So my question is, what is hustle culture?
I've lived it. I live it.
Living, right.
So I think it's funny that is the question. To me, hustle culture is, I view it in a lot of different ways.
Sure.
Being an immigrant, being a foreigner, is in a sense you're taught that you work, and you provide. In order for you to get what you want, you have to do it at all costs. And it does not include
Rest.
thinking about yourself. It does not include self-care as much, because if you have a goal, you go at what it takes. To me, it's really going after what you want at all costs.
I'm definitely hearing the priority is like self-preservation in some ways, right? Like we've got to survive, got to make it, got to do the thing. But I am curious about at what cost, right? There's not a lot of prioritization around rest, around taking care of yourself. So what is the impact on your physical and mental health there?
You know, I'm going to be like, Steph, I'll let you go ahead and go. But.
Well, yeah, I wanted to talk about what hustle culture is to me in terms of that. Like, I think, again, I'm a foreigner as well, but hustle culture comes from survival. It comes from the need to, or not having enough, not having enough money, not having enough food, not living in the place that is efficient or even enough for the people that you live with. I grew up, the first place that I lived in was where a 1-bedroom, and there was 5 of us, 4 of us, and that's what we could afford. So like hustle was being able to just hold on to that bit of living that we had. And then looking at what ways that you can level up from that lesser place. So hustle culture stems from not having enough, and you continue to have that perpetual battery in your back.
Sure, like feeling like it's never
Exactly,
enough.
that you have to continue to just keep moving in order to not either be where you were again. I know that's like a underlying thing for me of not wanting to go backwards after all the effort, the time, the sacrifice that your family put in. So hustle culture is about sacrifice. It's about not regressing. It's about continually thriving, and it goes side by side with capitalism.
It does.
For sure. So,
but there's also the opposite end of that, though. People who didn't come from the background of not having, but there's hustling that goes from people who come from the background of having and really wanting more. So it's not only just survival, I think, and I'm only speaking for my family experience, is in a sense is that my father's brothers and the upbringing is like they had, but there's always idea to be on top and want more.
Yeah.
So there's that hustling mentality that they had, they instill in their children. And like, I remember my dad would say, "We have, y'all don't have anything."
I think
so. That's what he used to instill in us around like, no, what we have is for us. It's not for you. So he didn't want us to get comfortable with the privilege that we have coming from where we came from, but also want to put in that if you want it, you need to work hard for it. And we always saw him working hard, and we always see my mom working hard. And my whole family members, that's the thing.
Yeah.
And if you didn't connect with that, you were viewed as lazy.
For sure. I can definitely relate to that experience. I think because my parents maybe grew up in more of a space of lack, they established things so that I didn't have that same experience, or at least wasn't aware of that experience. For sure. So in my mind, I had everything. I don't know that was, I kind of know now that maybe that was not their experience in the moment, but they made it work however they made it work. But for me, I came in contact with hustle culture by this idea of like not wanting to live less than I grew up as, or what I was used to, but also wanting to be more independent and like feeling like I didn't fit in the spaces of like being able to receive. Like my mom would take care of me today if I asked her to, but that also her rules, her regulations, like her ideas. So I jumped off the porch super early, like way earlier than I should have, just off the strength of I need to be myself. I need to be able to do what I want to do. So I don't think I can think of a time where I have never had like a job, at least 2, maybe even 3. Right? Because I'm like, I got to get the things that I need, and I'm working hard. I want to take that trip. I want to go on this trip with my girl. I want to go with my friends. I want to have nice things. And like Stephanie said, that being directly related to capitalism. Like, how does this idea of like producing and consuming really drive us to hustle culture? That really is like, to me, it's a new form of slavery. Like it's
the crab
just
in a barrel.
It definitely does the crab in the barrel piece, because like you said, even at the top, you fear going down. And when you're at the bottom, you just dream and fight to go upward. So it's just this elevator scheme, if you will, of like who can go up the fastest and who can stay there. But I also think that this piece around, like, for me, hustle culture in the way where like where I grew up, I'm Nigerian, I grew up in Nigeria, and the way that I lived there, drastically different than how I lived. And that's why I think that like survival / that rat race of trying to go back to what you know is ingrained. And even as me as a child wanting to help my family, like that feeling, that helplessness very early of like, oh, like we don't, like there's the rent, then you want to make sure that you have enough food, and then there's this, and then you just can't help but be like, okay, how can I help? How can I figure out a way to assist? How can I do this? And so for me, it's this perpetual thing of like having not only enough for myself to go on trips and do this, but what if my family needs something?
Right.
So to me, it's a thing of like always having that safety net of something in the back to assist.
Yeah.
Because of the role that I played, right? Like,
right, because I think
Yeah.
that also plays a role, you being the first.
Yes,
Yeah.
me being the first child and me being...
Because I think my sister had similar experience.
Yes,
like
and
you did.
also like in that hustle culture, coming from like wanting to save your parents, wanting to save your family, not wanting to feel helpless like that again. Like even the way feeling of like with me, my hustles, like I want to have all the money so I can see that I have the money. Will I spend it? Maybe, but even then there'll be a bit of guilt around why I spent it, or was that
Making
something
sure you're
that
not
you should
spending
of
too
this
much.
of this thing? I can spend it on other people or on certain things. But when it comes to like trips or other things that like was not something that I experienced growing up, there used to be a thing of like, oh, that was too much money. I remember like my 30th birthday. Oh my goodness.
A time was
I
that?
remember it was during like, or maybe it was before that time, but I had decided to do a whole theme. And I remember the price tag at the end. And for a good second after that, like sitting like, what, should I have done that? Like, and having this like voice in the back of my mind, right? Like I remember like even my dad being like things about like, why would you spend like things like that? Like, should I have done that? But I had a wonderful time.
Yeah.
Like very meaningful.
It was
enjoying,
vibes.
it was a great time. Like, but it's just that
It's what you were
piece
taught.
Yeah.
that then will be like, when you spend it, now I have to work hard to get it back.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the part where I was thinking about it, where productivity is how your worth is.
Yes. Yes.
That's what capitalism actually teaches us, is that because if you think about how minorities, they go to work, they give it their 100, they stay late, they do the most work, they volunteer for things just to prove,
For crumbs.
Yeah, just to prove like, hey, I am making a contribution,
Yeah.
I am worth it, but also realizing that, you know, you get the privilege who don't do anything and they elevate
I think
and
that
they move up.
I think that is just a really another way that we maybe perform, right? Like that we just maybe kind of put on a show, or maybe even like for like manage feelings of inadequacy.
Yeah.
I can achieve, I can do things, I know that I can achieve things through my labor, and that makes me feel good. And that can definitely be traced back to a lot of America's history for sure. Just how like brown people are for labor, essentially.
You know? Exactly.
Even blue collar versus white collar, there being sometimes a bit of a disdain, or I would say a little bit of minimizing of what white collar workers, and these are people who office like jobs, or like blue collar people are people who use their hands to work. And so there's this thing of like, well, you guys get to sit in the office and you guys get to just like, you don't have to
real work.
Right. Like my body hurts every day because I'm using my body in order to produce the money, the income that I quote unquote, and it's that I think also is ingrained in hustle culture, where we then start trying to measure each other and see who's putting in more, who has more worth, who
and we taught to go against each other.
Is stronger, right? And so like, let's talk a bit about what you had discussed a little bit further about like, what is the mental health impact of hustle culture?
Yeah.
Well, I end up getting high blood pressure.
Yes, that's physical.
I
Yes,
end
physical
up,
for sure.
Overweight.
Yeah.
I end up questioning my own sense of self-worth.
Yes.
Around, am I doing enough?
That's that mental fact.
I remember even younger feeling confused around the age of 18 and 19, to where my counterpart know where they were going, what they were doing, and I had no direction, and feeling like I was worthless at that time. So I embedded myself in like partying in college and being like that entertainer, but when the truth is I was dying inside. And then once I really figured out where I was going, I went full throttle, nonstop, and not really caring and stopping for me.
Yeah.
So there's a physical and mental damage that hustle culture does to you.
I agree. I think that our experiences are similar in that way, right? Like how the physical impact for me was I was not really taking care of my body at all. I'm working in college, I worked a night shift job. I had
Yeah.
class during the day.
Yeah.
I had an internship at some point. And then I found time for friends, party, whatever I was doing. But that's
No
because no sleep. Where was the sleep happening? I was barely eating. Like, and the mental toll, it just made me feel irritable and like I was working towards something, but it was never enough. When my undergraduate experience, particularly, I changed my major like 6 times. I did not know what the fuck I was doing. I'm just like, I'm here. My parents told me that I must have a degree. So I'm here.
Yeah.
But I wasn't, I don't think that I had the support that I like needed financially to really just be able to just focus on school. So I was hustling. I'm doing the jobs, I'm doing the things, and I think that is stuck with me, even though I'm obviously not in that position anymore. It's the thought of me having one job is so scary.
It's crazy. It's crazy, right? And I also think, because the truth is, the 3 of us actually have more than one job.
All of us, yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm like counting. If we count this as a job, we're the hands filling up.
We don't have no hands.
Yeah. So if I talk about like what I have seen with clients as well as myself in terms of like the impact of physical and the mental stuff, right? Like you said, there's weight gain.
Yep.
There are substitutes that we interact with in order to get more energy.
Yes.
Yeah.
We drink more coffee.
Yeah.
What's it called? Other people are housing energy drinks.
Yes.
People are doing other things depending on how quickly they have to like do stuff. People are losing sleep. And the studies
Adderall.
say a lot that sleep is literally your ticket to an early grave. Like not sleeping
Lack of.
will eventually take years
Yeah.
off of your life. And so, and we are cutting that off more and more
Yes.
in order to wake up earlier, to fit more things in our day. Also going back to us having more jobs, I'm sure we are not doing that just for the fun of it.
Oh no, that's what my next question was, right? So going to be, how do you think that hustle culture is really glorified and maybe encouraged in the climate that we're in today?
I mean, it's definitely encouraged because one, I don't think that I would be able to afford my life without those things, including the safety net. A lot
That's
of
a
people
fact.
will say things like, oh, your rent should only be 30% of your income.
How?
That's
Where?
Am I
not-
going to
Make
live
it
somewhere
make
else?
sense.
Because
Makes sense.
I will say that right now. My what's it called rent is not 30% of my income. It covers
Definitely
a
not.
larger amount of that. And so
Yeah.
then when you put in things like a car note, when you put in things like staying in a place that doesn't have is riddled with things like roaches or rodents or neighbors that are doing things that are, impactful to you.
Right.
That increases how much money that you have to spend on where you're living. When you're talking about groceries, we're talking about physical health of gaining weight or just like other things like high blood
Cost of the
pressure,
gym
the
and all
cost of groceries, the cost of
cost of living.
groceries
The
that
gym.
don't, what's it called, have high sodium or all these other weird things in it. Then all of a sudden it's like $200-$300 for groceries. And I'm a single
bags.
person, mind you. I'm a single person,
Yeah.
let alone
Exactly.
other people who have 3 children, 4 people, 5 people, households, things of that nature.
shout out
So
to the parents.
there's a lot of impact where I think hustle culture also leads to an increase in anxiety.
Yes.
Because you're perpetually always
Literally,
thinking
that's where my
about
anxiety came from.
survival.
Yeah.
And then there's also a link to that collapse. Depression is literally the flip side of that anxiety, is that you're going to push yourself to the point where emptiness, apathy is the way that your body tries to help you reset from that constant moving. And I know
Right.
that's like, for me, I don't know how much that I have absorbed until a nice bout of depression has
For sure.
smacked
When
me
your
right in the
body's
face.
like, you down now.
Yes.
Yeah, and your body will do that to you. But I think that we have been so ingrained in hustle culture that sometimes we don't even hear it when it's time. Like we don't really hear the build up. We only hear it when it's big, when it's loud.
But what about the message? I'm going to say something, and I had to really think and see, because language is a thing for me
Yeah.
now. But what about the whole idea of Black excellence and Black girl magic? Like, because your question is like,
Yeah. I mean, I think that
because it's great, but then to me that also
I think the
pushes
intention
part of it.
But even the word excellence.
I think the intention came from a pure place. At the same time, I think
But
the
what has it
idea
turned into now?
that Blackness only can equate to excellence or Blackness only equates to magic is very dehumanizing of our full range of experiences.
Yeah.
There are, in fact, some of us that just are not excellent. Some of us are just regular. And like that is okay too. You're deserving as a human being as well, even if you don't necessarily meet that mark. But all of that is influenced by this idea that the more that we produce or the more that we can give of ourselves, the more acceptable we can be in society.
Or even the more extraordinary we are. Because like you said, a lot of folks didn't have the ability to be recognized as unique or extraordinary. And so the ways in which that I'm able to prove myself is through my work ethic, or at least through the amount of hours that I put in.
Yeah.
Right? So if I didn't get the education, which allows me certain liberties at work, the ways in which I show up for that or make up for that is by working several hours to even get to the point where I feel like I'm enough. I'm doing enough. But even what you had said of like Black excellence, I think what it first started out was to acknowledge the extra mile that people of color, Black people, do on a regular, because compared to our white counterparts, to be recognized, to be seen as non-threatening, to be praised, we have to do more.
Yeah, they're
Just
looking for extraordinary.
we just show up in a way that requires more effort than those of our white counterparts. And so I think the Black excellence was in a way to acknowledge that, while the flip side, right, the yang of that yin is that it's going to then create this idea that you have to be
that.
Oh, if you do not perform to that extraordinary perfectionist level, then you're not enough. And I know that for me, when I don't feel like I am performing well at work and well in ways that I'm like knocking certain things, I know all the things, I was able to get ahead of all the pitfalls or obstacles, I get immediately struck in the gut, like with not feeling enough. Like it's not okay.
And that's the part that's invalidating about it, right? That's the part where the message is
That's the
skewed.
toxic part.
Yeah, exactly. That's the part and that's what I want to point out is that, you know, how do we unlearn that? I think for me, I'm in a phase in my life where I do want to unlearn some of these lessons. And it's not to take away from what they originally started from, but it's also noticing the toll that it has on me. But even interacting with people, even interacting with young kids, you know, even interacting with like the whole idea of being magic, the whole idea of being excellent. It's not realistic to...
Or not being a broke boy.
I'm not
like
fairy.
Not being a brokey.
Like
that's everywhere.
To me, that's the dehumanizing
No
shit
days
about
off.
it. Yeah. So I think it's how do you teach that, but yet still teach people and teach kids to like go after what you want.
But also, can I also add that hustle culture has seeped its way into vacation?
Oh, yeah.
You guys know that thing? It's like wake up, breakfast, shopping, another club, sleep. But you see how like there is this thing of feeling like
You gotta get
need
it all
to
done.
fit all of it in because I don't have enough time. It's because this is the one time out of the whole year that I was able to take a week off, but I know that when I come back, there's stuff to do. So let me get as much in of this experience as possible.
And it doesn't feel like rest. I feel like
At
to
all.
me, if
It
you're doing all
feels
this
like
shit,
an
it doesn't feel
additional
like rest.
rat race that you
Yeah.
kind of do. Like, I know a friend of mine always like, Stephanie, like, you just love to sleep. And I'm like, yes, I
That's
do.
so
On
funny to me.
vacation,
You know, Stephanie, you
On-
do. I give you that, sis.
I like to, one
You
thing
do.
about me, I like to rest.
Yes.
One, because I've always, from like, I can remember, I'm always running around doing something from like 6 a.m. to late into the night. And I'm always thinking about things all the time. So I don't mind resting. Like on vacation, doing all the things, being like, I feel like the brightest light bulb on vacation. And so in order to be that bright, you do need a certain moment of rest. Like there's a reason why the sun comes up and then it comes down and then the moon rises. Like there is need for both of those things.
Yes.
And hustle culture at times makes us feel guilty and lazy for taking the reset that is needed to push yourself to do the things that you need.
Yeah. I think that too, like, I definitely want to go without saying, right? Like, we can definitely offer some ways that we can maybe start getting out of hustle culture. But I think the reality is that there are systemic things that keep us from being able to get out of that hustle culture. Yeah. If we are not living in a society that is sustainable, that is affordable, that we can afford groceries, that we can afford to enjoy life, not saying that you can only enjoy life with things like by consuming, because there are lots of spaces and places where people have very little material things and still can be joyous and live life. But we don't live that way in America. Yeah. So it can be helpful, but almost sometimes as a therapist, I have this feeling of like hopelessness when my clients are coming to me wanting to figure out how to get out of the hamster wheel. And all I can offer them is just try to take care of yourself, try to tolerate, like try to figure out where you have the control, because there's just so much about this that is outside of our control.
It is.
Because they'll just straight up say, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I feel like I can't do that. Yeah. Or I have, and a lot of the times, hustle culture also, it leads us to be individualistic. Yeah. So we don't have support. So a lot of people can't take certain time off because they're not going to have anyone to, like, if support they do, they don't get paid.
Family themselves.
Right.
They don't, their parents are working multiple jobs, right? Like there's people who are retiring older and older because they don't have the ability to retire at the ages and help their, younger generation. Like that was what those things were put in place, that you're supposed to be able to retire at an age where that you can assist with your grandchildren and help, the parents provide and then lead to that kind of like collapsing domino effect of like assistance. We don't do that anymore. There's so much of an interruption where people are feeling like they're unable to do those things. So they have to push themselves past their limits.
I think the thing that did it for me is my grandmother passed last year or 2 years ago now. Yeah. Wow. But she passed, and like maybe a week before she passed, she's like calling me, like blowing me up, like, I need to go downtown to let my job know. And the way that I went off on her, I'm like, job? Girl, you sick. Right. But it just made like, mind. She's in the you're hospital, in your 80s worried about a job in your last days. And I vowed to myself after that, it could not be me. So even though I am still in the hamster wheel in some ways, I am much more intentional about how I spend my time and how much of that is related to work. Yeah. Labor.
Yeah, very much so. I definitely feel like I said earlier in the episode, that sacrifice is just part of hustle culture. Yes. But I refuse to sacrifice the things that give me life.
That's it.
In order, because I think that I'm at a point now in my career where I'm more than okay. Because I think there's like you said, there's this thing where we feel like we need more. I need to get the big house. I need to get the multiple cars. I need to have the fattest 401k. I need to do all of these things. And I remember like a reel being like, you're literally living the dreams of your younger self. And I'm like, that's so true. Facts. Like, I'm so financially secure in a way that I couldn't even have fathomed myself being. Like, where I'm not thinking all the time of like, oh, well, what if this happens? Will I have enough this for this? It's like, oh, I'll spend a large amount on something that I want, and it's not frivolous. And even if it is, it's gonna come, right? Like, and it's okay to be at that place of like, I feel good. But the word like complacent almost feels like a foul word.
Sin.
Like it feels like
Sinful.
you're cursing or something to say
Yeah.
that you're complacent and that you're
or stagnant, because
okay.
that's the thing. So I think it's a balance. So I agree and I
Right.
disagree with you, right? I think it's a balance because one, I think people struggle. How do you know when you've made it? How did you know when you've made it? Because you were still hustling until you realize you've made it. And two, I don't think people should be comfortable. And it's not because of hustling culture. It's because I believe personally, and I'm speaking for me, that you're supposed to thrive and grow. And therefore, if I feel too comfortable or if I'm stagnant or complacent, then I'm not growing. And, you know, it could be challenged. Well, that's the mind you instill to. It can, but it's also me and how I feel like what I need.
Yeah.
So I don't get comfortable. I don't get stagnant. And what I do, even with clinician I supervise, I'm like, no, don't get comfortable. Don't get stagnant. For the simple fact that once you do, you feel it, but are you living? And I don't mean, you know, noticing the difference, like you're not surviving, but now you're doing meaningful and purposeful work, which is the difference between I'm doing this to survive because I'm looking at my bank account constantly. I want it to be more or I have this. So that's still a hustling mentality in comparison to how am I pouring back into what was poured into me? What am I doing that's purposeful and meaningful? How am I keeping my brain moving? Because the thing about stagnation and complacency is that if the brain is not moving, is not functioning, there's a sense of growth or lack thereof that happen. And it does take away part of your life. Because it's like with retired people, if they stop working, stop really doing nothing absolutely at all, then their life expectancy actually does decrease in that sense. So, you know, with my mom who's retired on paper,
That's not
but the thought of just stopping for her, it's like she's tried to stay at home for 2 or 3 weeks. It's nice, but after that, she doesn't know, she's not thriving. So for her, it's like she's doing studies, she's making remedies. She's like, you have to keep going.
You do.
So in that sense, so I don't believe in stagnation or complacency.
I think that maybe what you're talking about is more ambition versus that hustle culture. But there can
I don't think it's
definitely
ambition,
be
because
like
there's a drive, I think, with ambition.
well, I guess there can be kind of a thin line there too, right? But sometimes that idea that we can't be comfortable and we can't like be stagnant is also driven by hustle culture in some ways, because we're human. We are not robots. We have to be able to be comfortable and rest at some point. And there can be, I guess it also kind of think about how you formulate your definition of what it means to be comfortable.
I think that's what it comes down to.
That can be driven by that.
Definition of that. It comes down to, like I said, knowing the fine line between hustling, because it's like there's that anxiety between my mind needing a sense of fulfillment, which is where I'm at. My mind needing a sense of, okay, you've learned this, you've mastered this, okay, what is it that you want to learn? Not something you are expected to, because there's this desired of outcome around being seen, being this, being that. It's just a sense of keeping you going. And that's why I said I think there's a difference in terms of how you define what it is, and knowing the difference when you're hustling. To me, when I'm hustling, is like literally I'm like, I got to make this happen. I have this going on I need to pay for. I have that going on. Or I'm trying to elevate to this level and I'm trying to get here.
So I guess I would say then the word is, for me, the word that I was saying that feels like a foul word, and it feels like it's a foul word to you too, is complacent. But I think that the word that you're referring to is content, right? There's a difference between being complacent and being content. And I will say that I think I'm at a place in my life where I am financially content, where in connection to what you were saying, Jay, I was doing a lot of things where I felt like I had to, like, I was just trying to make money. So I was literally
make it add up.
Bobbing and weaving. I'm talking about I was a tutor. I was a gym trainer. I was a referee. I did homes. I did so many things in order to figure out how to get money. Versus now, all the things I do are in the things that I want to, that interest me, that are enjoyable, that are like right in the alley of what I want, not things that I feel like I need to do. And so to me, that's the difference between hustling, because hustling was doing 50, 11, a million jobs in order to meet a quota.
Exactly.
Versus me being content now is finding ways in which that I thrive that scratch those values, those things that are genuinely meaningful to me, but also we have to also take in the privilege that come in the fact that we can do that.
Do that. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
That's the part of it. Like
reality, we had to hustle to get there.
Yes.
And and I love that for me and all my homegirls, because I feel like we're kind of all in a space where we have like worked really hard to get up to this point.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like, even hustle culture, I guess, how do you think that hustle culture share a little bit about how hustle culture shows up in the therapy space?
I think it shows up in like
LGs trying to get their hours.
Yeah.
They're trying to get
Going
how many hours as
super
quickly as possible.
Yeah, and not really taking in the stuff that they're learning. Or even like, I think regular clinicians who are Cs, also for them, if they're working for a provider, they have to meet a certain amount of billing and numbers.
The quota.
Yes.
And I think also for them is, okay, the more client that I see, the better it is. Or people who have this motivation to start practices, and y'all ain't got no business starting no practice by yourself.
Or don't have the foundation. I think that's encouraged.
I think it's like, because I think now, pre-pandemic, or is it post-pandemic, is that people have the idea of like wanting to work for themselves, but don't really have the footing or the foundation to see what that looks like. So they go hard and then they crash without really going in. So I think, and then for clients, I think it just go in where you go into therapy and you keep wanting to be fixed. Wanting that quick fix around
people
like, give me skills, give me something.
Hella therapy, have different counselors. Oh, I have a EMDR counselor. I have a DBT counselor. I have a counselor that works on this, right? Like it's I'm going to also take ayahuasca and this thing as well too, right? Like, so it's like, it's this race to get to the end. And it's all about outcome. That is how I think hustle culture is weaved its way into the therapy space, right? Like, how can I, what's it called, even show how therapy, how much knowledge that I have in terms of the ways in which I even speak, how many books,
and then miss the human experience,
or even this thing of like, how many CEUs have I taken, how many, what's it called, articles have I written, how many, like, it's this thing of like finding ways in which to shine brighter and be seen as the brightest star, right? But it's like, what did you come into a helping profession to do, right? If it was not to help. At least that's the cornerstones of what I thought going into it is about. It is so, it's not, those people will burn out because this is not a job that you can have to just make money. No. You take on people's experiences, you develop relationships with people. It is a job that you genuinely have to care about giving a shit about and like care about continuing to develop yourself in. So people that are in it to just say like, oh, I could get $150 a session, $300 a session, so I could get money. You're not gonna last long. You're not. What's that saying? If you want to do it fast, right? You'll do it very quickly. You'll get all the clients. You'll make all the money, but you will not last more than 10 years. I remember in grad school, this one guy coming in, and he was like 50, 60 years old. And he was like, I've been practicing for 25, 30 years. I think about our, what's it called, consultant. You know, he's been practicing for 30 years. You don't do this work for that long if you're just running through what's it called, clients, trying to get the hours, trying to get the money. You genuinely have to find your niche, find the things that keep you going, because clients are hard. They come in and they can be very difficult, challenging, and also get in their own way and be self-sabotaging and turn around and try to blame it on you. So like there's a lot that comes into our job. And so that's in the therapy space, but if we're talking about just like human beings in hustle culture, how to both take time for yourself while also surviving in the rat race, because the reality is the environment isn't going to just up and change. We might be moving
Right.
slowly but
That's
surely
where the excitement comes in.
towards
We
some
might be
things.
shaking the table.
Yes, but in that us growing in that way, in the table being shook, right? We still need to find some anchor
To
and
ground.
some, I want to say solidification.
Yeah, I think that what we've been talking about today, right? Like finding meaningful opportunities, value. That's the things that we can ground to, our community, our values, the things that are important to us that help us to stay in life that are not monetary. There's so many ideas of richness that or just wealth that are not related to monetary value. My partner has an individual who asked her, she's like, are y'all rich?
Right.
And I'll say, yeah, tell her the Bob Marley way.
Right.
Because we are rich in our intentions, in our relationships, and in our community.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it'll always be that, whether I'm
But
hustling or not.
Yeah, and I think it's funny you brought about wealth, but also as we're wrapping up is looking at the fact that I have to give it to what are they, Gen Zs? Them
Yes.
people? They're not playing about their life. They're like F the hustle culture out
Baby.
here. They're like, because my child called me, she like, yeah, this 9 to 5 shit is not for me. She's like, I need a break. This is too much. Like, I would
They're
literally
not
her
coming
age
back into
at
the
24.
office,
I would
literally.
never imagine saying that.
No,
like,
24, I'm like,
I'm
I've got to dress like I'm in corporate. Like,
I'm just like,
Yeah.
and then I remember saying like, oh, well, then you didn't go make, and I caught myself like, you know what? She's right. Like,
I'm glad
this
that you
is too
said
much.
that.
Like, you're right. And I said, take your break. Where can you put it in? Because she would think she used to say, she's like, because I don't want to be like you.
Okay, because I'm like, do it. I'll be telling
you know
them.
what? I said, I want you to be better than me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm realizing her better is really her observing her limits of taking time off, because she grew up around all of her siblings, everybody like working, working and, having degrees, elevating and all of that. And she's wants that for herself. She just realized my way,
It's different.
I can't do it the way y'all do it. Like,
I love that.
And I
Shout out to
definitely
her.
Honestly,
respect
I am
her for that.
real envious.
I
of
am.
that, because I know when my sisters say certain things that I will just find my mind contorting into like, that's lazy, or
Right.
like, how do you think you about to survive? And because like a part of me is recognizing what they're saying is true.
Yeah.
It
It
is.
is a lot. I remember like running around at 23, 24, trying to like meet the needs of all these older
Primary
like
or-
folks, like trying to do all of these things and feeling very anxious, feeling very like consumed about whether or not I was doing what I was supposed to
Right.
be doing, to then now, how many years later, right? Feeling a sense of like settling, right?
Yeah.
Giving very millennial boss
Yeah.
and the like, chill. Like, it's really
Right.
okay. Like,
You feeling sick? Take them days
right?
off.
Like, it's really not that
But
big of a
it's funny
deal.
because her job have mental health days that they encourage
Yeah.
them to take.
That's
In the
beautiful.
building that she's in, girl, they have a spa, they have a quiet room.
Nice.
They have
Wow.
all these things. And I'm like, if
I have
more
never had
companies.
that experience.
Yeah.
Mind you, the helping professionals companies,
We don't get shit. They're
We're
just
the
like,
ones that need it the
see these-
most,
Yes.
bro. Are you kidding? A spa
Yeah.
room? I will be in that joint every.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If you want to get people in the office, maybe you should start
do
putting some of these things in, folks.
No, straight up. My teenage cousin straight up told her mom that she was part of the generation that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And
The soft life.
And my aunt,
They want the
she
soft
really struggled with that because there are a couple of generations removed, and like she has worked very, very hard to have
give
for
her
them
the
to
life.
have the life that they have.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, I immediately was like, she ain't lying.
Right. Because it makes sense. It's like getting that balance. And I think that's what we need to learn from them. I think people think we can't learn from the younger generation. No, we actually can, because they actually observe. They were the observer.
Yeah.
And now
They finna
they're
teach
switching
us.
into like, okay, part of observing is also acting on. Now we learn from them. We start learning from their environment instead of the other around. I think
Yes.
that's something to kind of like take heed to.
Shout out to the youth. Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely, they're definitely changing and shifting things in me,
Right.
and it's really helping, honestly. Like getting, because at first, I'm not gonna lie, I'm immediately met with frustration, annoyance,
Envy.
agitation at them like doing those
Yeah.
type of things. Like I like them like even having like the
audacity.
audacity.
Yeah.
And then also then me being like, why do I feel like that? I
Right.
feel like
Because I
that
didn't
because
have that
that was
privilege.
not something I had the opportunity
Yep.
to be
Right.
able to experience. That wasn't something that I could even know was on the table.
Yeah.
And so why am I somehow trying to knock it off for them because I didn't have it or feel some type of way? But the reality is I also have the choice
Right.
to do it as well too. And I sometimes will feel slighted in the fact that I missed out
Right.
because I'm not experiencing that opportunity or privilege as early as they
Yeah.
did.
Right.
But it's like I'm still in a
Giving
place where I can
learning
do
that
it
you can give
too.
yourself permission.
I can do it right
Exactly.
now.
Learning that
Am
you
I
can
anybody
give
who about
yourself
to hit me?
permission.
I can do
Who
that
about to get
today.
me? Like who about to fire me
Keep like-
in this day and age, bro? Like no,
Right.
like it's very much giving
Yeah.
like I have worked to the point where I am secure
Yes.
and being
This-
able to be settled in
Yeah.
that. And like you said, in like growing and in growth, sharpening my tools so that if the table does shake, if the boat does get rocky, don't worry, I was working on a kite. I was working
got
on a
somewhere to
parachute.
land.
I had something in the back
Got my
that was
gear.
going to get me to where I needed to go. So
Yeah.
like that's part of the hustle culture that is an advantage, is that I worked to a point where I created a strong foundation. I have the ability and the capability to move past whatever life might show up. Because I think that is an underlying fear of like, what if I have to go back to working as hard as I once did?
And you did before.
I don't know that I would.
And that's the
that
thing.
part.
And I was like, I don't think I'm going to be at that point again. It's just a fear.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'll ever be at that point where I didn't have my degree. I didn't have like the
Right.
experience that I had. Like I have
Yeah.
all these things already underneath my belt. So I'm never going to step in that same pond of like
Yeah.
starting back at zero.
I think that us letting go of hustle culture in some ways allows us to realize that there are several ways that we can live, and that that there's not one path to success or like one path to sustainable life. Sometimes that looks like doing all the things, getting the degree, getting the job, getting the business or whatever. And sometimes that looks like just being a part of community, working within your strengths. And I think so letting go of that will allow us to just be a little bit more human.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Are we gonna move into our listeners' letter?
Yes, let's take a look at letters from listeners.
I never expected to be in this position. My husband recently admitted to having a crush on his therapist. He and his therapist both recognize it as transference, since she reminds him of an ex who ghosted him, triggering obsessive thoughts and emotional excitement. He's been honest with both of us, has set boundaries, and is committed to working through it. He's even open to switching therapists if things don't improve. But as much as I admire his willingness to face this, I can't ignore my own feelings. Anxiety, insecurity, and a lingering fear that continued sessions might only deepen his attachment. I don't want to be the reason he leaves a therapist he trusts, but I'm struggling with how to handle this. At what point should a therapist refer a patient out for erotic transference? What does working through it actually mean? And most importantly, how do I manage my emotions without making this about me? I'm already in therapy myself, trying to process everything, but there seem to be so few resources for spouses in this situation. If you've been through this, or have insight into navigating transference in therapy and relationships, I'd love to hear from you.
My husband has a crush on his therapist. What does working through transference look like?
Hi.
Well, so what's transference for our viewers is when you, as a client in your therapeutic space, experience emotions, thoughts, feelings toward the therapist that are outside of the therapeutic relationship. So this could be feelings where this person reminds you of your mother, your father, a boyfriend, an ex, You might feel a sense of like warmth, safety, love, maybe even some of those kind of like up and down kind of feelings that you're used to having with like, you know, relationships that you've been in. You feel like you want to see them, but then you're also feeling like you don't like them at the same time. So it is things that will show up where you are now experiencing that therapist as like you would in a non-therapeutic space.
Yes. I guess the opposite of that is counter-transference, when the therapist might be placing their values or experiences onto the client. And it's not uncommon for that to show up in the therapeutic space. In fact, it's almost anticipated. Like we're human, so there's no way for it not to show up. I think about my own experience of starting off with doing, I started off as a clinician in the jail. And it was a humbling experience. One, everybody looked like me. And we was all around the same age. We perhaps may be in the same circles at some points in time. So that in itself was like, but then you bring me into a male prison, a male jail, where people have maybe been in there for some weeks, some months, some years, even awaiting trial. You have not really had an interaction with a woman, and perhaps I am the first woman in your life who has actually heard what you're saying, listened to you, validated you, and just had a non-judgmental stance for your experience. So it's natural for transference to come up there. But it really is the therapist's job to maintain their own ethical boundaries and to manage that transference. You as the client have to also be open about sharing when those things are coming up for you. So our listener here, perhaps I've got some questions for her. I think she's got some of her own stuff going on where she is really like concerned with managing that transference as someone who is not even the actual client.
Also looking at the fact that I do respect the husband for even
boyfriend.
No, I think it's
husband.
It's husband. Respect the husbands for one, telling
even
his
sharing,
therapist that there's, you know, this quote unquote crush that he's experiencing, and being honest with his wife about it. So there's a level of communication and safety I think he feels with both women to express what's going on. Now, sis, on the other hand,
concerns.
I think what I want to ask her is around because I think she herself had expressed something about having a crush on somebody else or something. Right?
And I think it's in their like history. There has been like moments where they have had like crushes on other people. And I think she has been upfront about the things that's shown up, and he has been as well too. And she also says that she's working with a therapist as well, and some of her questions were around if it is appropriate for the therapist to continue the therapeutic relationship, because what she called it was an erotic transference. So I haven't necessarily
I've
never heard what that is.
The term
Honestly,
of erotic transference. But what I think what she's trying to say is, when the transference is that of a romantic relationship where the person likes the other person or finds them physically or emotionally attractive. Right? And so that, of course, is going to cause, it seems like, a threat with our listener, right? Like, she seems like she immediately clocked that as this is not something that I'm used to experiencing from him, right? Because she maybe acknowledged that she has had, experienced that herself. She's not experienced that from him. And also, it is repetitive. It's not something that has gone away. And the fact that it's actively, present. So she's wondering to some degree, is this going to threaten how he sees me? Am I still... my status and my importance in his life. So basically her
insecurity
I would say like there's a bit of anxious attachment that's showing up in her thing where she's feeling like, am I going to be slighted? Am I somehow like she's feeling a sense of jealousy, which makes sense in this point, right? The jealousy makes sense, and like I'm wondering if he's going to be taken away from me, right? And I also think that there are some things to acknowledge in the fact that you are triggered by something that you cannot control.
Right.
Like someone having a crush, right, is not something that she can do anything about.
Right.
Yes, he could end the relationship with the therapist, but there's still going to be that lingering thing from just what I can get of, are you still thinking about the therapist?
Right.
Are you, what's it called?
What was it about her that you found
right?
attractive?
Do you feel like so there's
because it was something like I think she said he reminded her of the ex. So are you still thinking about
Right.
him going back there?
right?
Or is
So
there some
that has
connection?
already uprooted something,
Yeah.
regardless of whether or not the
He changed his
solvable
therapist.
thing of like, oh, let's just move.
Right.
It's already uplifted that, right? And as the listener had said, there isn't a lot of information out there because it looks like you did a lot of research about how a partner deals with somebody else.
Let me tell you.
I mean, it's really
let me
not for
tell
your partner to deal
First of
with,
all, let me
like-
tell you, you in therapy, sis. Okay, like let's cut the shit. Like, I'm sorry, I'm
Talk to
sorry.
your therapist
Let's
about
talk to
that
your
shit.
therapist. That's what the shit is for.
gosh.
You don't have to do no research, okay, girl. Like this is your neuroticism. Like, no, you are the one dealing with the control. You creating something for yourself that's not there. You have a secure husband who's secure enough to say, hey, babe,
This
honey,
came
whatever,
up.
like this came up. And for you to if you tell me you're in therapy, I'm like, okay, work through that. There's no other resources for you to look at because that's
You
you
have
trying
them.
to control something to your point that's beyond your control.
Yeah.
So cut the shit and like talk to your therapist. And yes, to their point, let your husband and the therapist who he has told you, the therapist said they're going to work with me on that. Let him do his work. And the fact that he's in therapy, like you said, if you're really proud of that. Focus on your own therapy, your own treatment, your own anxious attachment issues, sis. Okay? So that's my advice to you. Okay?
Y'all
You don't
see-
need to do no more research. The research is when you go to them sessions and stop performing and start telling the truth about what's happening.
Y'all see Jay's therapy stuff.
Yes.
So I was gonna
That's
say
mine.
something like,
Okay.
of a different flavor than
what I said.
Jay in that
Shit.
one, is to say, like, I understand, like, one, there isn't a lot of research of what to do if your partner is transferring, but the reason why there isn't research, right, is because that's something that you would bring up in your therapy session, right? And basically say, I'm having my own hang-ups about my husband and his relationship with his therapist, right? And then also, one, being able to have you had conversations with your husband about the things that you're experiencing.
Right.
Because in what ways
Because-
can he potentially, A, provide some, it looks like there's some reassurance or some validation that you're needing about maybe your place in that relationship. Also, I think there's this underlying thing of like, people Google these days.
And
People
that'll
are
get you fucked up
always-
every time.
It will definitely provide you with
Dr.
extra
Google
things
ain't
to
no
think
damn
about.
Google,
But I will
okay?
say that
Like-
like people are always going to look for advice on how to deal with something they haven't dealt with before, or don't feel like it's something that like is unique, right? Like she obviously
You can
thinks
read
that
Dr.
this is
Google and
something.
advice all you want.
She thinks that this is something that is unique, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
nobody has ever experienced this before.
Even
and
the
often,
question, right? Like, what does this look like? How is the therapist even handling this? That
Right.
tells me already that you
because
feel like
mind
this
you,
is not
even like
something
you
that
want to
happens.
be reassured, you want some kind of, because you don't have a framework.
Yeah.
There isn't anything that you can see, so you're looking for something to compare it against.
Right.
But there's also a fragility that's going on with her and her husband, that she's fragilizing him and not saying anything. But I also wonder if she herself know that, even with the assurance that he seems to be giving to her, would it be sufficient?
Right.
Because I
Is it
feel
enough?
like
She looking for
if they're
something.
having a conversation, which she seems like they are having a conversation, I think he's validated her experience in saying what he's saying, but I wonder if that's sufficient for her and what she's seeking, because she wants to tell herself a narrative. Hence why talk to the shit with your therapist
Yeah.
is around like, there's something missing in you. Okay, there's something that's happening to you. Now you hear that, oh shit, like I had a crush on somebody, now he's having it. And the rumination is looking at the facts of what's happening. If he's forthcoming and honest about where he's at and what's happening, then the work that needs to be done is with you. In Googling and doing all that, it's fine And at the same time, what coping skills do you need
Right.
to get through this?
tolerate, yeah.
And there's not a research you're gonna find around that, because this is something that happened often that's usually worked through the therapeutic space. Now, if she tell me she didn't have a therapist, then that would have been the recommendation. But
yeah,
since
but
she did,
you working with a person who could give you the
Which
answers.
is one of the questions, was what was one of her coping skills? I would say the first thing that I would say would be suggesting is stopping your thoughts from escalating, because she's doing some catastrophizing, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't have an answer, so she's probably in her mind trying to make sense, which is very human of us to do, and comparing so many things. So at that point, as soon as you start to notice yourself creating narratives or wondering what is happening, you should stop.
Yeah.
And you need to reorient yourself, or pretty much pay attention to something else. Do something else in that moment. Okay. Another thing,
is there guilt involved
Sure.
and there might be that
from their own past experience of what they shared?
There might be, in terms of like, is this kind of like a
payback?
Yes. Is this kind of like a punishment? But either way, what I would say is some thought-stopping techniques would be something to help with, right? If your therapist that you're working with is a CBT therapist, which I'm sure they are, they can help you with challenging some of those things. Also, a little advice for the husband, maybe stop telling your wife that you're having obsessive thoughts about your therapist.
But do we know that he actually said
Thank
that
you.
language? I have a lot of questions.
Is
Like,
that
with you, question.
maybe limit how much you are telling her about what's happening in the therapy session.
Right.
That would be...
Yeah, I do think it's appropriate to think about that too, right? Like it is, you are hiring a therapist because you want to be able to talk to the therapist about things that you maybe are not able to talk to the people in your life about. Whether that is like, I need to be able to sort this out in a way that they can understand it. I'm not trying to hurt their feelings or whatever. So everything that you talk about with your therapist, you don't then have to report that to your spouse. And I think that is perhaps where the confusion happened. Not to say that the husband shouldn't have been, not to say that the husband shouldn't have been upfront, but I wonder how much of the information that he shared prior to working through that with the therapist, like, are you sharing the appropriate information? Because the wife seems like she needs to be receiving information that is reassuring, not that like, oh, this is happening and we're working through it.
Right. She also believed that if he changed therapists,
That it was
better.
right, and which you probably will have some transference there too.
Like,
she might,
It's a
because the
Band-Aid.
active threat is not there, but the seed has already been planted of doubt, and that is something worth looking at. But so we suggest definitely bringing this up with your therapist, doing some thought-stopping techniques, as well as maybe some emotion regulation, because it seems like you get triggered when you are either given the information or you yourself start thinking about it. And also give yourself some grace, give your husband some grace.
Having your own obsessive thoughts.
Yeah. And just
and
continue
maybe
to put the
schedule
work
your
in.
own therapy session the same time as either if y'all ain't got no kids. So then your mind will be busy exactly
Or your
where it
own
should be.
stuff.
That's
Sure.
nice. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So like we said, we definitely want to continue to hear from you all. So you can write in more listener letters at Couch Chronicles TAD@gmail.com. Again, Couch Chronicles TAD@gmail.com. We may read it on the show, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, this was a great session.
It was.
Yes. Bye,
you.
guys.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.